Literacy is a complex skill that is acquired and developed over many years. Today's classrooms are filled with diverse learners with unique educational needs. Because of growing technological advances and increased global interdependence, the need for well-developed literacy skills is paramount. Reading specialists are invaluable resources that can provide general and specialized support to students and fellow teachers. What follows is a synthesis of my coursework, classroom experience, and personal reflections, and how they have shaped my ever-changing understanding of literacy. What are the stages of reading and writing development? Stages for reading development are useful as they provide teachers a sort of blueprint for literacy acquisition that details general expectations of their students' growth. Janine Shaw describes 6 stages of reading development that begins at birth and extends into adulthood. These stages begin with pre-reading, then move to initial reading and decoding, confirmation fluency, responding to learning new information, multiple viewpoints, and finally, construction and reconstruction. What are the stages of writing development? Writing is also an integral component of literacy development that should be practiced daily and incorporated throughout their curriculum in order to strengthen literacy skills. It is important for teachers to encourage writing practices and provide time to adequately develop and share the craft through free writing and structured activities. However, it is important to note that literacy is evolving. Reading specialists understand the stages of reading and writing development are fluid and overlapping. They recognize that children do not progress along a developmental continuum in a rigid sequence. Rather, each child exhibits a unique pattern in timing and acquiring skills and understanding related to reading and writing. Reading specialists must be prepared to guide students through this experience. What is the continuum of theoretical approaches from which I must draw upon when teaching? And who are important theorists and researchers in the field of literacy, and what is their impact on instructional practices? Theory plays an integral role in the development of literacy models and instructional practices. When teachers have a clear understanding of theory and their instructional implications, they develop a foundation for understanding why they are choosing the instructional practices that they choose. With knowledge of theory comes various instructional strategies that can improve instruction. One can think of theoretical knowledge as owning a deluxe toolkit. By developing a deep knowledge of theory, a teacher can easily reach into this toolkit to give effective instruction to all learners. During my time at Georgia State, I was introduced to many different learning theories and their instructional implications. Because I don't believe that any one theory can adequately explain all aspects of learning, I find I incorporate several theories and models into my teaching. I draw on the theory of cognitive development, social constructivism, schema theory, top-down theory, whole language model, transactional theory, reader response model, critical literacy theory, and the Holiday Plus model, family literacy theory, and bottom-up, from which develops skills or phonics-based approach. How has the field of literacy developed over the past 50 years? The biggest debate has been between bottom-up theory and top-down theory. In the mid-1990s, educators began to adopt a more balanced approach to literacy that includes aspects of both theories. The balanced approach included a series of modeled, guided, shared, interactive, and independent reading and writing skills. At the beginning of the 21st century, another shift occurred due to decreased test scores, distrust of teachers, and the National Reading Panel's call for reading methods to be scientifically based, reliable, and replicable. The classroom is now riddled with commercially produced reading programs and materials that claim to incorporate the National Reading Panel's 5 pillars of reading instruction: phonemic awareness, phonics, vocabulary, fluency, and comprehension. What are phonemic awareness, phonics, vocabulary, fluency, and comprehension, and what role do they play in literacy development? What important theoretical and practical issues must I grapple with as I try to maximize student achievement by implementing instructions across each of these areas? How have I implemented or observed these approaches being taught in my program in classroom? Phonemic awareness is a child's basic understanding that speech is composed of a series of individual sounds that are blended together to make words. The National Reading Panel identified phonemic awareness as a critical precursor to learning to read and preventing reading difficulties. I have used sound matching, sound isolation, syllable segmentation, rhyming words, and phonemic blending activities to help students develop phonemic awareness. Phonics is a set of relationships between phonology, the sounds of speech, and orthography, the spelling patterns of written language. I use a systematic approach when teaching phonics, as I explicitly teach a variety of spelling rules and generalizations. My students conduct word sorts, word hunts, manipulate magnetic letters to form words, create charts of words with similar spelling patterns, and access a variety of digital websites that reinforce my phonics instruction. Vocabulary, fluency, and comprehension are intimately related. Vocabulary refers to the words we need to know in order to effectively communicate. I use a variety of vocabulary building strategies, including graphic organizers, mnemonic strategies, dictionaries, word plays, digital games, and illustrations to develop vocabulary. I also explicitly teach vocabulary during pre-reading activities so that students can devote more cognitive processes to extracting meaning from the text rather than decoding. According to the NRP, vocabulary acquisition and development is integral to decoding as well as comprehension. I explicitly teach various comprehension strategies, including main idea, making inferences, drawing conclusions, and summarizing. Because of my coursework, I also incorporate many question-generating activities, such as SQ3R, as good questions can guide students search for information, lead them to consider difficult ideas, and prompt new insights. Reading fluency is the ability to decode text with speed, accuracy, and prosody. My students have participated in various different activities, including readers' theater performances, to develop oral reading fluency. During readers' theater, my children's oral reading rates, accuracy, and prosody all improved. More importantly, the children loved reading aloud, and many were even motivated to write more authentic scripts. My students also successfully put on a poetry reading, where they recited self-selected poems. I find activities such as readers' theater to be very effective in engaging ways to develop reading fluency. What follows is a clip from our poetry reading.
And eaten by a boa constrictor, a boa constrictor, a boa constrictor. Oh, I've been eaten by a boa constrictor, and I don't like it one bit. Oh, what do you know? He's living on my toe. Oh, gee, he's up to my knee. Oh, my, he's up to my thigh. Oh, fiddle, he's up to my middle. Oh, heck, he's up to my neck. Oh, dread, he's up to my...
How do the theories discussed in Standard 1 play out in general classroom reading and writing instruction? And how might I adjust these practices to apply to the instruction of specific student populations I plan to teach? The theories discussed in Standard 1 are incorporated throughout my reading and writing instruction in a variety of ways. Vygotsky's theory encourages teachers to differentiate instruction and scaffold learning to reach all students. I also use literature circles and writing workshop to provide a space where students can share text and writing samples with one another. Instructional practices such as partner, buddy, and cross-age reading are also supported by social learning theories. I use webbing, brainstorming, various vocabulary activities, anticipation guides, and previewing exercises to activate and build prior knowledge. The use of graphic organizers also aid in organizing students' thoughts. I incorporate constructivist theory through the use of collaborative groupings, which encourage student discourse and provide support for ELLs and struggling learners. Hands-on projects also support different learning modalities. I incorporate top-down theory, or the whole language model, by forming literature circles and other groups based on students' interests, conducting reading conferences, using mini lessons to introduce skills, and allowing students time to have authentic reading and writing experiences. My students also free write and keep reading response journals, where they are encouraged to make text-to-text, text-to-self, and text-to-world connections, two instructional practices that are consistent with transactional theory. I create culturally relevant instruction by encouraging students to share personal artifacts and anecdotes from home that connect to our units. I also have an extensive library that includes many culturally relevant texts that engage and motivate learners from all backgrounds. Finally, I use family literacy theory to create a sense of community in my classroom. I encourage parents to come visit and share their expertise. What variety of assessment tools can teachers use to better understand their students as readers and writers? As a reading specialist, assessing students' literacy skills will comprise a significant part of my job, as I must have knowledge of a variety of assessment tools in order to accurately diagnose and monitor student progress. At the beginning of the year, I use screening and diagnostic assessments, such as informal reading inventories, DIBELS, and spelling inventories, to gather initial data. I use monitoring assessments and formative assessments throughout the year to help me gauge whether or not my instruction is effective. Assessments such as kid watching, classwork samples, miscue analyses, running records, portfolios, and rubrics help me gauge student learning. I find that these authentic assessments give a more complete picture of a student's growth and progress. I also use outcome-based assessments at the end of the year to measure students' mastery of state standards. What strategies do I recommend to match children with appropriate texts, and how can reading teachers foster a lifelong love of reading in their students? I find that interest, confidence, and dedication are key in developing motivated readers and writers. I administer interest surveys, allow students choice in their reading materials, encourage buddy reading, and level my library so that students choose texts that are on their independent levels. I develop reading goals with each of my students to create purpose, encourage students to share books with their peers, and allow time in class for free reading. Why have you decided to read more Roald Dahl books on your own?
I decided to read more Roald Dahl books because we read Charlie and the Chocolate Factory as a class, and it was a really great book, so it influenced me to read more Roald Dahl books, and my brother told me that Roald Dahl was a great book, was really good at writing books.
Okay, great, thank you. What have I practiced regarding observing and working with new teachers and other colleagues? During my practicum, I had the opportunity to observe and mentor a second grade teacher. When conducting observations, I made sure to take detailed notes regarding instructional strengths and weaknesses. I always made sure to open our debriefing meetings with a positive note, and we discussed in detail the strengths and weaknesses of the lesson. I also suggested readings that would help the teacher plan and implement better instruction. The teacher and I identified the need to differentiate instruction in order to reach the needs of all learners. I was able to suggest several useful strategies, including analyzing diagnostic data in order to form ability groups, incorporating graphic organizers, rearranging desks to form cooperative groups, and implementing guided reading. The teacher was very responsive to my suggestions, and on subsequent observations, I noticed significant changes. After seeing the positive changes in his instruction, I realized that I do have the pedagogical and instructional knowledge to provide effective support to my instructional staff. As I leave Georgia State, I take with me invaluable insights, knowledge, and increased confidence that I will use in my future leadership role to positively influence literacy instruction on a larger scale.